Hey everyone, happy Friday. Hope you've all been staying safe and healthy. And I am back with another edition of Friday Reads. For this week, I read Draven by Tracie Delaney, and it features Jamieson on the cover. I'm going to start by reading the back of the book, and then we are going to jump into a little mini interview that I had with Tracie about Draven. All right. Detective Louise Rhodes' sister is missing, abducted in broad daylight by a gang of ruthless human traffickers. She's not the only one. There are others, many others. Left with limited options when the search for the women reaches a stalemate, she turns to the one person who can help her, Draven, her nemesis, the man who hates her guts for her supposed betrayal 8 years ago. Well, too bad. He'd better get over it and fast, or face the consequences. 8 years. That's how much time has passed since she stuck the knife in and sent his career shooting in a direction he hadn't anticipated. And now she has the gall to waltz back into his life as though nothing happened and demand his assistance. Tough shit, sweetcheeks, not a chance. Until she presses the one button she knows will launch him into action. Fine, he'll play along, but she'll pay for her sins, one way or another. So I've worked with Tracie on multiple projects over the years, and each being very different from one another, but this, Draven, is my absolute favorite. It is very dark, very edgy, suspenseful, has some shocking moments, romance and love as well. Pretty much features the full gamut of everything that I personally love to read. I love when there's suspense. I say this all the time. Suspense and some mystery intertwined, which this has a lot of that. And I think she melded all those elements very seamlessly within one another. Of course, you kind of know that Louise and Draven are going to get involved with one another when Louise is kind of at a stalemate trying to find her missing sister that got abducted, and she goes to him for help when the FBI and the police department that she works for just aren't coming up with any results, and she refuses to just sit by idly and wait for them to figure it out. So she takes matters into her own hands. And while her and Draven hate each other, they also love to hate each other, and things really blossom and develop. Yeah, and I just really enjoyed it. So we are going to jump into my little mini interview with Tracie. My first question was, this book is of a much darker nature than others I've read in your catalog. Is that something you consciously went into before you started writing it, or did that come about naturally? And she says, Draven wasn't supposed to get a book. He was always a side character, Cole Brooks' best friend in the Brook Brothers series, Dayton Summers' private investigator in the Irresistibly Mine series. And that's where it was supposed to end. But Draven is a force of nature. He sure is. A big guy with an even bigger personality, and he demanded his story be told. I guess when I gave in to his demands, I knew it would be darker, but I didn't anticipate the book I ended up with at all. There was a point where I deleted over 10,000 words because Draven insisted I wasn't telling his story right. Well, she definitely did tell his story, right? After finishing reading. Seriously, this character challenged me more than any other I've ever written. And I've penned a few asshats. Draven, though, took that to another level. I think it's safe to say we have a hate-hate relationship. Number 2. I love that Louise was named after your friend and PA, who I personally think is hilarious on Facebook. What made you pick her for this story? And she says, real Louise is amazing, which I agree. Seriously, I love her so much and I honestly don't know what I'd do without her. From the moment she met Draven in the blame game, she loved him. She championed him so hard. And what better thank you for everything she's done for me over the years than to name the female lead after her. Of course, Louise Rhodes is in the book is very different to Louise in real life. I don't think I could have written her any other way. And I really do like Louise's character a lot. She's very strong, doesn't take no for an answer. She's relentless in trying to find her missing sister, which I think is amazing. Number 3, Louise and Draven have a very combative and sometimes volatile relationship during the course of this book. I believe in part that was due to them each having similar dispositions. What do you think really brought them together? And she says, oh yes, they are more similar than they'd ever admit, to me or to each other. They really literally are the same person. Louise always knew deep down that Draven was the one for her, but when they first met, she was far too young and naive to cope with a man like Draven. Yeah, I could definitely see that being the case. It takes a hell of a woman to tame him, and at the time she wasn't ready. I think even if she hadn't needed his help to look for her kidnapped sister, they'd have ended up together at some point. That would have been interesting. Another story. They're like two halves of a whole. Neither is complete without the other, even if they'd never admit to such a thing. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. They really are very much two halves of the same pie. If you could only describe this book in one word or phrase, what would that be? And she says gripping. I would say shocking. Without giving too much away, did you have a favorite scene to write and why? Yeah, the scene where Louise takes out her frustration on Draven's beloved bike. I laughed so hard writing that scene. I loved the fact she wasn't scared of him, even though she should have been. Mad Draven is scary Draven, but she saw red and he paid the price, lol. I think that he's still recovering. That was a funny scene. My favorite scene, trying to think of how to describe it without really saying much. Okay, Draven gives Louise some career advice that she then takes to work and puts it into motion. And I'll just leave it at that. He gave her really good advice in a time that she very much needed it. And my last question was, what would you like readers to take away after finishing reading Draven? If they've read other books of mine, I'd like them to see my versatility. That's very important to me as a writer. I don't want to write the same kinds of books over and over. I'd get bored. I want to constantly challenge myself, learn all the time, and make sure to keep the reader on their toes. Which, like I said before, this was very different from any book I've read of Tracie's that she's written before that I've read. So I think she definitely accomplished that with this. If Draven is the first book of mine they've read, I'd like them to close the book or switch off their Kindle with a big sigh of satisfaction, with thoroughly entertained from the first page to the last. Oh, and that goes for those who have read other books of mine too. Like I said, this was my favorite book of Tracie's, Draven. So if you haven't read it, check it out. And if you have read it, what did you think about it? I hope everyone has a safe and healthy weekend, and stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe. Bye guys.